You know that pervasive idea we've all completely internalized?
Oh, definitely.
The one that tells you if you are not deeply uncomfortable, you are not growing. It's the whole no pain, no gain philosophy.
You're right.
But we've applied it to absolutely every single aspect of human existence. We tend to treat ourselves like raw metal that just, needs to be hammered on an anvil until we're forged into something better.
Something stronger, yeah.
Exactly, something stronger. Think about how we talk about our careers or our relationships, even our fitness. We are constantly searching for that pressure. We look for the fire.
We really do.
We just assume that if we aren't being actively struck by the hammer, we are somehow falling behind or
Right.
stagnating.
Yeah.
And I know you, listening right now, you have that drive to understand the world and improve yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't be here otherwise.
Right, exactly.
But trying to grow by constantly seeking out the heaviest hammer you can find is, well, it's a fast track to total burnout.
It is an incredibly exhausting way to live. And, it fundamentally misunderstands human biology.
Right.
The underlying assumption in our modern culture is that pressure is the primary, or, even the sole mechanism for human development. We assume stress equals progress.
Right, which is why today we are taking a deep dive into this really fascinating essay. It's titled, Surety Precedes Growth.
And what precedes surety?
Yes, exactly. And what precedes surety? And our mission for this conversation is to dismantle this exhausting myth.
Yeah.
We're going to look at the actual physiological and philosophical mechanisms of how human beings develop, because the research shows something completely different from that whole hustle culture narrative.
It really does. And the journey to get to that truth is quite remarkable.
Yeah.
We are going to travel from the clinical realities of modern nervous system science all the way back to the oldest cosmological frameworks humanity has ever recorded.
Which is wild.
It is, and the core argument here is that pressure, just on its own, does not automatically produce growth. Without a very specific foundational condition, pressure only produces adaptation. It produces a hardening of the self, which, looks like growth from the outside.
But it's actually something entirely different.
Exactly.
So to really wrap our heads around this new paradigm, I think we have to break down the old one that you and I encounter every single day.
The hustle culture myth.
Yeah. The author of this essay refers to it as the myth of productive suffering.
Right.
We are taught from a very young age that discomfort is the absolute engine of growth, and that disruption is the catalyst.
Yep, it's everywhere.
And the result of that conditioning is that we learn to fundamentally distrust ease.
Oh, absolutely.
Like if we sit on the couch for an afternoon, we feel guilty, we second-guess our need for rest, and we view any kind of stillness as a failure to optimize our time.
Which is a compelling myth, because it isn't entirely false.
Wait, really?
Well, yeah, pressure does sometimes produce change. A traumatic event or a high-stress job, a grueling schedule, they all force a person to change their behaviors to survive.
Okay, sure. The trap, though, is that we have conflated change with growth.
Oh, wow. Okay, that distinction is everything. I'm going to try an analogy here to see if I'm tracking this.
Go for it.
Think about getting calluses on your hands from lifting heavy weights at the gym or maybe doing manual labor.
Right.
Hustle culture looks at those rough, thick calluses and calls that growth. You lifted the heavy thing, your hands changed, so you grew.
Right, that's the narrative.
But physically, your skin isn't becoming better or more advanced or more capable of feeling. It's actually losing sensation.
Exactly.
It's just building a dead, hardened wall to protect you from damage.
That physical representation mirrors the psychological reality perfectly. There is a vital distinction between genuine growth and mere adaptation.
Yeah.
True growth integrates new experiences. It expands your capacity to hold the world. It transforms you.
Okay.
It doesn't just accumulate armor. Adaptation under duress is basically just survival wearing flourishings clothing.
Survival wearing flourishings clothing. I love that phrasing. Yeah, it's powerful. Because pressure alone doesn't create growth. It only creates a rupture.
Right.
What determines if that rupture becomes actual expansive growth or just lasting damage is the presence of something else entirely. That foundational element called surety.
Surety. Okay. That is the secret ingredient turning the pressure into actual development.
Exactly.
But since it is the anchor of this entire concept, we need a really precise definition of what that word actually means in this context, because it is incredibly easy to misunderstand.
It really is.
Let's start by clearing the brush and talking about what surety is not.
Good idea.
First off, it is not confidence. Confidence is just a relational performance metric. It's about how you present yourself to an audience.
Right, whether that audience is your boss, your partner, or just strangers on the internet.
Exactly.
Huh?
You can be outwardly confident, projecting absolute dominance, but be completely hollow and ungrounded on the inside.
You see that all the time in high-achieving environments. People, performing confidence while their internal foundation is constantly on the verge of crumbling.
Right. So it's not confidence.
No. And another common misconception is confusing surety with certainty.
Certainty. Okay.
Right, certainty is epistemic. By that I mean it's about the rigid content of your beliefs.
Oh, I see.
When someone is desperate for absolute certainty, gripping tightly to a specific dogma or a rigid plan for their life, they are usually terrified of the unknown.
Right. The grasping is driven by fear.
Exactly. And fear is the biological opposite of the groundedness required for real growth.
Okay, and here's the most surprising one for me. Surety is not the absence of doubt.
Right.
You can hold massive amounts of doubt. Like, you can be entirely unsure of what to do next and still be in a state of surety.
Yes.
That is because doubt lives in the cognitive layer.
Yes.
It's just a series of thoughts happening in your head. Surety lives somewhere else entirely.
It's a deeply somatic phenomenon. It happens in the physical body before it even registers in the conscious mind.
Oh, wow.
Surety is your nervous system's experience at what clinical psychology calls the window of tolerance.
The window of tolerance.
Yeah. It means feeling a physical sense of settlement in your body. It's the underlying feeling that the ground beneath you is solid
Right.
and that your core self is not at risk of being annihilated by whatever challenge is happening in the room. It basically means feeling safe enough to remain present.
Safe enough to remain present, not safe from the challenge itself. I mean, you aren't avoiding the heavy lifting or the difficult conversation.
Right. You are not sheltered from difficulty, but your internal state is secure enough that your nervous system doesn't force you to collapse, flee, or mentally fragment into pieces just to survive the moment.
I want to dig into the actual biology of that for a second.
Sure.
Because if you are pushed way outside that window of tolerance,
Huh.
let's say you are enduring immense pressure at work or going through a brutal personal crisis, and you do not have that somatic surety,
Right.
what is physically happening in the brain? Are we just completely tricking ourselves when we think we're getting stronger through sheer trauma and extreme stress?
We absolutely are tricking ourselves.
Really?
Yes. When you are pushed outside that window of tolerance, the sympathetic nervous system takes over. You go into pure fight, flight, or freeze.
Right, survival mode.
Exactly. And in that state, the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of your brain responsible for complex thinking, emotional regulation, integrating new information, it literally goes offline.
Oh.
The brain redirects its resources to the amygdala, focusing purely on threat detection and immediate survival. And here's the biological bottom line. A system under active threat cannot simultaneously reorganize itself.
And reorganization is what genuine growth actually is.
Precisely. If your brain is offline and just trying to survive the next 10 minutes, you cannot integrate the experience. You just learn to manage the threat.
You build a callus.
You build a cap.
This explains so much about human behavior. I mean, we all know people who have endured tremendous pressure or spent years grinding in high-stress, toxic environments.
Oh, yeah.
And you realize later they haven't actually grown as people. They've just hardened.
Exactly.
They might have built an elaborate architecture around their trauma to function in the world. And they might even be highly successful on paper. But functioning isn't flourishing.
That's beautifully put. Functioning is just paying the bills of survival. Surety is the internal biological condition that makes the reorganization and expansion of the self possible.
What I find so compelling about this research is that it doesn't just stay in the realm of modern clinical therapy and brain scans.
Right.
It takes this exact concept of surety and maps it onto human history. It turns out we have known this truth for millennia.
We really have. The author explores this through a cosmological frame.
Yeah.
If you look closely at the oldest mythologies humanity has ever recorded, you find this exact understanding, that a grounded state of surety is the prerequisite for all creation.
The primordial mother traditions, right? I was blown away by this part.
It's fascinating. In ancient traditions across the globe, whether you are looking at the Sumerian goddess Ninhursag, or the Hellenic Gaia,
Right.
or the Vedic deity in ancient India, or even the Celtic Danu, the very first principle of the universe is not an active interventionist creator.
Okay.
It isn't a figure who stands outside of nothingness and forces the universe into existence through sheer willpower and a hammer.
Right?
The first principle in all these traditions is a ground. It is a womb condition. These mother figures aren't running around forcing planets to form or life to grow.
They are the condition that makes growth possible.
Exactly. They are surety made cosmological.
We have so completely inverted this narrative in the contemporary world. We tend to think creation comes from chaotic violence, like a big bang of sheer masculine willpower where something is forced out of nothing.
We do.
But ancient traditions understood primordial chaos very differently. They didn't see it as violent turbulence. They saw it as a fertile darkness.
A preform, yeah.
Right, it was a foundational ground,
Yeah.
so total, so stable, that absolutely nothing was excluded from it.
And the cosmological mother represents that original surety. The lesson embedded in those myths is that growth emerges from a stable ground, not from being hammered into shape.
It makes me think of planting a garden. When you look at nature, the modern hustle approach seems ridiculous.
How so?
Well, you don't take a seed, hold it in your hand, scream at it to be better, and then put it under a hydraulic press to force it to sprout.
Right, that would destroy it.
Exactly. You take the seed and you place it in dark, quiet, stable soil. The soil doesn't actively force the growth. It doesn't do anything but hold the seed. But by providing that quiet surety, that holding environment, the growth becomes inevitable.
That is a perfect analogy. The fertile darkness of the soil is the exact ecological equivalent of the nervous system's window of tolerance. It is the environment where integration happens.
Okay, so that brings us to the most pragmatic question for anyone listening. We know that growth requires this somatic surety, this stable ground. We know we need the soil. But where does that surety actually come from?
That is the million-dollar question.
Right. If you don't naturally feel grounded, how do you get there? The research outlines a descending chain of what precedes surety.
It does. It breaks down into 3 descending layers, starting with our earliest experiences. The first layer is developmental. It is the somatic experience of being received.
Being received, okay.
Yeah. When an infant is born, they have no concept of self. But when that infant's cries are registered and responded to by a caregiver, when they are held, fed, and soothed, that infant begins to build an internal physical model that their existence is viable.
Right.
Attachment theory has mapped this out extensively. They learn that the ground of the world has room for them. Being witnessed early on gives the self a structural rootedness.
Wait, hold on. I have to jump in here and push back a bit, or at least advocate for the listener who might be feeling a bit alarmed right now.
Okay, sure.
Because if foundational surety requires this perfect, attentive early childhood holding, aren't a huge portion of people just fundamentally doomed?
It's a very valid concern.
Many people listening did not have caregivers who provided that stable mirror. There was trauma, or neglect, or simply overwhelmed parents. If you didn't get that as a kid, are you just incapable of true growth?
It's a critical point. And if that first layer were the only way to achieve surety, we would all be hopelessly trapped by our pasts.
Right.
The physical rootedness of childhood is the ideal starting point, but it isn't the only path. That leads us directly to the second layer, which is how surety can be actively cultivated from the inside as an adult.
Okay.
Through self-recognition.
We need to be crystal clear about what self-recognition means here, because it is not what you see on Instagram.
No, absolutely not.
This is not self-acceptance in the pastel toxic positivity sense. This isn't staring in the mirror and repeating a generic I am enough mantra while ignoring your actual life.
It is much more rigorous and, frankly, much more uncomfortable than that.
Yeah.
Self-recognition is the hardcore willingness to look at the entirely unedited self without flinching. It means dropping the strategic performance you put on for the world.
Wow.
It means dropping the version of you that was shaped by what was acceptable to your parents or your peers and looking at the actual, raw, messy self. And crucially, it means staying with it.
Staying with it without instantly trying to fix it.
Yeah.
That might be the hardest part of this whole framework.
It really is.
We are so conditioned by the productivity mindset to see a flaw, a weakness, or an ugly emotion and immediately pull out our tools to start hacking away at it.
Right. We turn our very existence into a self-improvement project.
Exactly. But the argument here is that by simply looking at your raw self, calling it real, and remaining in that statement without scrambling to change it, you generate a surety that is incredibly durable.
Because you are becoming your own ground. You stop relying on external validation to prove you exist. You are providing the holding environment for yourself. But there is an even deeper layer. The third layer, sitting at the very bottom of this chain, is the precondition for even that self-recognition.
which is fascinating because even before you can look at yourself, there is usually so much mental noise in the way.
Oh, tons of it.
I mean, I find it nearly impossible to just sit and observe my raw self because my inner monologue won't shut up. I'm rehearsing arguments, planning dinner, worrying about an email.
And that is why the absolute foundation of this entire framework is silence, the experience of the unmediated present.
Okay.
Before you can truly recognize yourself, the constant, exhausting activity of the self-constructing mind has to stop. The narrating, the managing, the performing, it must cease, even if just for a brief moment.
But you aren't talking about forcefully suppressing your thoughts,
Okay.
right? Because that is just more pressure. That's just applying the hammer to your own brain.
Exactly. No, it isn't about effort or fighting your brain into submission. It is about the arrival of stillness. This is the root of contemplation, somatic presence, and meditation practices worldwide. You aren't trying to achieve a specific enlightened state. You are simply creating a condition where you can finally notice what is always already there beneath the noise. Pure awareness itself.
Wow.
That awareness is the ground of all grounds.
It ties beautifully back to those ancient myths. That deep inner silence is the personal equivalent of the primordial mother, is the fertile darkness inside us.
Exactly.
But I have to say, hearing all these layers laid out, stillness, then self-recognition, then surety, then finally growth, it can sound like a massive, exhausting to-do list.
It can, yeah.
Like, great, now I have to achieve perfect enlightened silence and radical self-acceptance before I can even begin to grow.
That is a very common reaction to this kind of deep internal work. But the framework offers a profound clarification here. The structure is not a ladder you have to climb step by step.
Okay.
You don't graduate from stillness, then move on to self-recognition, and finally arrive at the pinnacle of growth. The structure is recursive. It's a continuous loop.
Meaning all these levels are always present and accessible within us right now.
Yes. You don't complete them, you practice them. Every time you take a breath and return to stillness in the middle of a chaotic workday, you are simply reestablishing the ground.
I see.
Self-recognition isn't a prerequisite you cross off a checklist. It is an ongoing practice that continually waters the soil of your nervous system so that when the pressure inevitably comes, you are ready to receive it.
When you really zoom out and apply this to how we live our daily lives, it completely changes the paradigm. Think about the old hustle culture question we all ask ourselves when we're trying to achieve something.
Right. What will challenge me enough today?
Exactly. What forcing function can I create that will make me develop? That mentality treats you like a passive piece of metal just waiting for the hammer to strike.
And the new, much more rigorous question this framework demands is what conditions allow me to remain present?
Ooh, that's good.
It forces you to be brutally honest about your actual capacity in any given moment. Instead of asking how much pain you can endure, it asks, what do I need in order to encounter this difficulty without fleeing, without mentally fragmenting, and without hardening into armor?
That is so powerful because it completely revalues how we view rest. We have this deep-seated guilt about slowing down.
We do.
But this flips the script entirely. It argues that rest, slowness, and spaciousness are not just lazy pauses between episodes of growth. They aren't just you wasting time.
Not at all.
They're the exact vital conditions where the integration of growth actually happens.
It's biological truth. The body physically processes and integrates the day's experiences during sleep.
Right.
Have you ever noticed how a complex problem at work is suddenly solved by an insight that arrives while you are taking a quiet walk or standing in the shower?
Oh, all the time.
It never happens while you are staring aggressively at your desk, clenching your jaw. The self reorganizes in the spaces we typically undervalue, precisely because those spaces don't look like hard work. They look like ease.
So if we pull all of this together, growth is not the product of pressure. Pressure just provides the raw material, the new information.
Yes.
Genuine growth is the product of a grounded self remaining present through that pressure without shutting down, and then having the quiet spaciousness afterward to actually integrate it into something new.
Which brings us to a crucial point of reflection for you, the listener, to consider long after this deep dive ends.
Yeah.
If we stop treating ourselves as endless self-improvement projects waiting to be hammered into shape on an anvil, and instead view ourselves as fertile grounds to be carefully cultivated, look at the biggest struggle in your life right now.
Okay.
The problem you just can't seem to force your way through, no matter how hard you grind.
I love framing it this way.
What if your inability to push through it isn't a lack of willpower at all? What if that heavy resistance you are feeling is actually your nervous system's desperate request for you to to find stillness and to finally establish your ground before you try to build anything else.
Wow, that completely changes how you look at feeling stuck. You aren't failing to grow, you are just missing the soil.
Exactly.
It turns out that heavy hammer we talked about at the beginning, you can put it down. You don't need to be struck to transform. You just need to embrace the fertile darkness, find your stillness, and locate your surety.
Beautifully said.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take a deep breath, go find your ground, and we will catch you next time.